Today I will explain the story of 9/11, an unfortunate day in America, and an attack on the Twin Towers that marked the end of the two iconic skyscrapers which were once the tallest buildings in the world. 23 years ago, the September 11th attacks happened in New York City, which would change the course of history and the world. I will also include video and audio of the attacks in order to explain the events in detail and what occurred on that day. 9/11, also known as the September 11th attacks, were four coordinated suicide terrorist attacks carried out by terrorist militant Islamic extremist group Al-Qaeda that happened on September 11th of 2001. On that morning, 19 terrorists would hijack four commercial airliners, in which two would be deliberately crashed into the World Trade Center in New York City. A third plane would be crashed into the Pentagon, and then a fourth plane hijacked intended to crash into the Capitol in Washington, D.C., but instead it crashed into an open field in Pennsylvania. The attacks would kill a total of 2,977 people, not including the hijackers. In today's video, we will go over each attack that happened on that day in order to understand it more, and also through the media like CNN. This video will go in order as a timeline in order to describe each event. American Airlines Flight 11 would hold 90 people on board on the morning of September 11, 2001, including 11 crew and 81 passengers. Of the 81 passengers, 5 of them would be hijackers associated with Al-Qaeda, who all intended to hijack the plane to crash it into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. Mohammed Atta, the supposed ringleader of the attacks, would get on American Airlines Flight 11 alongside the other 4 hijackers. The flight would depart at 7:59 a.m. and the 5 hijackers would hijack the plane at 8:14 a.m. after storming into the cockpit after the pilot stopped responding to requests from the Boston Air Route Traffic Control Center. Flight attendants Betty Ong and Amy Sweeney would attempt to alert the airline's staff of the hijacking, each making phone calls, which some of them are available to be heard and listened to online if you guys want to check it out. But both brave flight attendants would alert them while on the plane, speaking about the hijacking. The pilot of the plane would be Captain John Ogunwaski, of 50 years old, and First Officer Thomas McGinnis Jr., of 42 years old. John would die in the air on Flight 11 during the hijackings, most likely being killed alongside McGinnis. The purser of the flight was Karen Martin, and there were 8 flight attendants when the plane was taken over by Atta. Mohammed Atta would hijack the plane at 8:14 a.m. and at 8:24 a.m. apparently trying to make an announcement to the passengers, but instead keyed the wrong switch and instead got picked up by air controllers, would make 3 announcements, 2 at 8:24 a.m. and another at 8:33 a.m., all being picked up and broadcast to the Boston Air Route Traffic Controllers. All those messages were picked up, but the plane would reach New York City and be deliberately crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center at 8:46 a.m. The only known footage of the first plane crashing into the North Tower was that of Jules Naudet and his brother, who were 2 French-American filmmakers.
This just in, you are looking at obviously a very disturbing live shot there. That is the World Trade Center, and we have unconfirmed reports this morning that a plane has crashed into one of the towers of the World Trade Center. CNN Center right now is just beginning to work on this story.
Two attempts to intercept the airplanes were attempted by two F-15 fighter jets, which took off around 8:53 a.m. But by that time, the plane had already crashed into the North Tower 7 minutes earlier. The plane would crash at a speed of about 465 miles per hour, hitting between the floors 93 and 99 of the North Tower. The plane, which was headed to Los Angeles International Airport, had about 10,000 U.S. gallons of jet fuel, which burned the building. United Airlines Flight 175 would hold 65 people on board, including 9 crew and 56 passengers. Of the 56 passengers, 5 would be another 5 hijackers, who all planned to hijack the plane and crash it into the South Tower of the World Trade Center. The flight's pilot would be Captain Victor Saraceni of 51 years old and First Officer Michael Horrocks of 38 years old. The purser of the plane would be Catherine Labore, and 6 flight attendants would be on board. Ashiri, the lead hijacker, and the 4 other men would get on board between 7 a.m. and 8 a.m. that morning. The flight would depart at 8:14 a.m. around the same time that Flight 11 was hijacked. Flight 175 would be hijacked by the men at 8:43 a.m. and it is believed that the attackers forcefully stormed the cockpit and attacked the pilots. There was also reportedly the use of bomb threats and mace during one of the phone calls of one of the passengers. Flight 175 would also face near collisions mid-air, missing 2 airplanes by miles. Flight 175's flight data could still be properly monitored, unlike Flight 11, who had its transponder off. The controllers would make several attempts to contact Flight 175 with no avail, and would instead work to move other aircraft away from Flight 175. The plane would reach New York City and be deliberately crashed into the South Tower of the World Trade Center. Many news outlets and the media would capture the moment live while recording the first plane's impact of the North Tower. The second plane would hit more faster than the North Tower at over 500 miles per hour and strike floors 77 and 85 of the South Tower. The flight was also headed for Los Angeles International Airport. It departed from Logan International Airport in Boston, Massachusetts. The plane would be crashed at 9:03 a.m., 17 minutes after Flight 11, and had approximately 9,100 U.S. gallons of jet fuel. News coverage would capture the impact, and CNN would also capture it, with it starting broadcasting the North Tower's impact at 8:49 a.m. Both of the aircraft were Boeing 767s. 2 World Trade Center would be the first one to collapse at 9:59 a.m., and the 1 World Trade Center would collapse after 1 hour and 42 minutes at 10:28 a.m. The president at the time, George W. Bush, was on a visit at an elementary school in Sarasota, Florida, when at the time he was in the classroom while a teacher was reading a book to her students when at 9:05 a.m., White House Chief of Staff Andrew Card whispered in his ear about a second plane that had hit the other tower. Upon hearing this, George W. Bush, shocked, waited for the teacher to finish reading and left to get brief on the matter at Emma Booker Elementary School. 20 minutes later, George W. Bush would then held a short press conference in the school library before returning to Air Force One, where he would stay airborne until the threat was over.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a difficult moment for America. I unfortunately will be going back to Washington after my remarks. Secretary of Rod Page and Lieutenant Governor will take the podium and discuss education. I do want to thank the folks here at Booker Elementary School for their hospitality. Today we've had a national tragedy. Two airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country. I have spoken to the Vice President, to the Governor of New York, to the Director of the FBI, and have ordered that the full resources of the federal government go to help the victims and their families, and to conduct a full-scale investigation to hunt down and to find those folks who committed this act. Terrorism against our nation will not stand. And now, if you join me in a moment of silence. May God bless the victims, their families, and America. Thank you very much.
American Airlines Flight 77 would hold 64 passengers on board, including 6 crew and 58 passengers. Within the 58 passengers were 5 terrorists who all intended to hijack the plane and crash it into the Pentagon in Arlington County, Virginia. The flight would depart at 8:20 a.m. that morning and be hijacked around 8:51 a.m. During the attack, 2 passengers on the plane made phone calls to family members to relay information on the situation. At 9:37 a.m., Honjur, the lead pilot hijacker, would crash the plane into the west side of the Pentagon, killing everyone on board instantly. The west side of the Pentagon would instantly catch on fire that would take days to extinguish completely due to all the jet fuel the plane had. 33 minutes later, by 10:10 a.m. that morning, the damage by the plane and fire will lead to the collapse of the Pentagon's western flank, followed by 5 stories 40 minutes later. Flight 77 from Dulles International Airport in Northern Virginia, intended to fly to Los Angeles International Airport, would take the lives of 125 people in the Pentagon alongside 106 injuries due to this action. Meanwhile, in New York City, the attacks caught the eyes of onlookers who saw the smoke coming out of both towers, wondering what had happened. At 9:45 a.m., the FAA would order all aircraft to an indefinite ground stop for all air traffic and airspace until September 13th, and requiring all aircraft to return back or divert to Canada. An estimated of over 10,000 people were in both towers when the North Tower first got hit, many of which would be above the impact zone. This led to the frightening realization and decision of many from the North Tower to either jump out the towers or die from the fire. Some of the people who jumped were photographed from below as onlookers looked. At 9:59 a.m., the South Tower would collapse after being on fire for 56 minutes, leading to more casualties in the building.
On the ground of that scene.
The North Tower would collapse at 10:28 a.m., 1 hour and 46 minutes after being the first one hit, but this one would get hit at a slower speed, leading to it collapsing last.
That second tower to collapse, we cannot tell you. CNN's Kelly Wallace is on the phone with us. Kelly, where are you? What can you tell us?
Aaron, I'm just about 4 blocks north of the location of where the World Trade Center was standing. I was actually en route to the command center. People really staring.
That have taken place in Washington, on the Pentagon. The State Department has been evacuated. Just a few moments ago, as we said, and perhaps 20 minutes after the first tower collapsed, we turned around and saw
United Airlines Flight 93 would hold 44 passengers, including 7 crew, with 4 hijackers on board. The flight was intended to fly from Newark International Airport to San Francisco International Airport in California. The flight intended to depart at 8 a.m. would be delayed due to airport congestion and would depart until 8:42 a.m. While airborne, the flight will become hijacked and be the 4th plane hijacked in the plot.
United 93, that traffic for you is 1 o'clock, 12 miles eastbound 370.
Negative contact, we're looking United 93.
Somebody call Cleveland?
Under American 1060 with you, we're 370, we're slowing due to the delays possible going eastbound.
That's American 1060.
You got United 93?
United 93.
South of Chardonnay,
Yeah.
it's descended.
What's that?
I just saying, it looked like he descended
I
there.
don't think so. United 93, verified 350.
United 93, Cleveland.
Go ahead, Frankie.
Do you have United 93 south of Chardonnay?
We hear some funny.
They got them pieces down, keep remaining steady, we have them all aboard. So it's
Calling Cleveland Center, you're unreadable. Say again slowly.
yeah, that transmission you said was unreasonable. It sounded like
After 46 minutes, at 9:28 a.m., the cockpit would be breached. It is unknown why the hijackers took so long, but by this time the passengers would become aware and learn from the other hijacks and attacks while the hijacking was taking place. Many calls from the passengers would be made to family members from the flight, some being available online, which I will link in the description and resources to read information I forgot to mention in this video here. At 9:59 a.m., the passengers on their plane, after learning of the other attacks and an act of heroism and bravery, would revolt against the hijackers, and after 6 minutes, at 10:03 a.m., would overwhelm the hijackers, leading to them ultimately nosediving the plane in a field near Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Everyone on board would instantly die after the crash, leading to no survivors. It is known that the plane's target was the Capitol or the White House in Washington, D.C. after an investigation. The plane's flight recorder would be recovered after 3 days on September 14 and would be confiscated by the FBI, who withheld it due to an ongoing investigation. Overall, all 4 attacks would leave the world devastated and in shock. The 9/11 attacks in total would kill 2,996 people and over 6,000 injuries and health problems in the aftermath. The Trade Center attacks would destroy the original World Trade Center complex, and upon investigation from the CIA and FBI, they would conclude that Al-Qaeda under Osama bin Laden was responsible for the attacks. The United States would respond with the invasion of Afghanistan under Taliban rule after they denied bringing bin Laden to justice, and the War on Terror, a multi-decade war. After a 10-year manhunt, Osama bin Laden, the leader and founder of Al-Qaeda, on May 2nd of 2011 would be killed after a U.S. military raid operation on his compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan. Other members of Al-Qaeda with involvement with the attacks would be caught and imprisoned in Guantanamo Bay under custody with charges. To this day, some members remain at Guantanamo Bay still at charge. 10 years after the attacks, many memorials for the victims of all 4 attacks would open to the public. In 2014, a new World Trade Center would be completed and opened next to the memorial in a new mall. Overall, the September 11th attacks was the worst terrorist attack in human history, and it shows us like horrific acts like these happen, and shows us a terrible act perpetrated by Al-Qaeda. The attacks led to the casualties of many innocent people in an act of terror and the collapse of the Twin Towers, an attack on the Pentagon, and the bravery and heroism of Flight 93 passengers that could have led to more destruction. We will not forget. May all their beautiful souls rest in peace.
We are simply not close enough right at this point. We are following the smoke in the air right now. There are several boats and watercraft, as we can see in the river right now. We'll try to get a better vantage point and see what we can see on the ground. It's a little difficult from the air because the buildings kind of shadow the streets, but no doubt a lot of activity on the ground right now. Wow. That apparently does look like it is in the other building at this point.